Let's see how to use Clonezilla to backup and restore a disk. We're first going to backup a disk by creating an image for it, and this image is going to be an exact clone of the disk. Later on, we will use this image to restore the disk, so it will get back to the exact state in which it was when we created the image. We're going to need two things for this. The first one is a USB flash drive, such as this one. And the reason we need it is because Clonezilla uses a live session, very similar to what you use when you run an Ubuntu live session or when you install Ubuntu. So we're going to flash Clonezilla on this USB flash drive, and this way we'll run Clonezilla. The second thing that we're going to need is some massive storage device. I'm going to use this one, an external hard drive. The reason is that it's going to contain the image that we're going to create. So its capacity must be at least as big as the disk that we want to clone. Anyway, this one has 5 terabytes, so I'm okay. So let's start by heading over to clonezilla.org. And let's choose download. And I'm going to choose the first option. It's based on Ubuntu 22.04 Jammy, and it works really great. Now, as the CPU architecture, I'm going to go with AMD 64, but for the file type, I'm going to change it and go with the ISO option. Okay, let's download the file. And it takes a second, and then it downloads the file. It's about 400 megabytes, nothing crazy. Okay, so the Clonezilla ISO file was downloaded, and I now have it in my downloads folder. We now need our USB flash drive, and that's because we want to make it bootable with this ISO file, with the Clonezilla ISO file. So let's plug it in. And to make it bootable with this ISO file, I'm going to use the disks utility. And we need to choose the USB flash drive from the list on the left. It shows all of the disks, and I want the USB flash drive, so let's choose it. I'll remove all of the partitions it currently has. And instead of them, I'll create one big partition. And now I'm going to pour the contents of the ISO file to this new partition. So let's click on the cog icon and restore partition image. And the image that we want to restore is the ISO file, of course. So it's in the downloads folder. Here it is. We are being warned that everything on the USB flash drive will be wiped out, so make sure it is the correct drive, and then click on Restore. Okay, this is done. So the Clonezilla USB flash drive is ready. We need one more preliminary step, and that's on the big storage device, this one, the external hard drive in my case. So let's plug it in. And what I'm going to do is create a new folder in this storage device. As you can see, it already has something called Clonezilla rep, which I created in the past. But for this video, I'm going to create a new folder, and I call it Clonezilla repo 2. Make sure that the name you choose contains no spaces. It won't work if it has any spaces. But this one doesn't have any spaces, so it's okay. Okay, so the preliminary steps are done. We're ready to start with Clonezilla itself. We now need to restart the computer and use the USB flash drive to boot from it. Now, this machine is actually a virtual machine, and I'm using it because it's easier to record this way. But if you're on a physical machine, what you're going to do is just restart the computer and quickly tap on Escape or F2 or F12 or Delete. It depends on the manufacturer of your computer. But the point is that you want to get to the boot manager. You can only get to it after you restart the computer. So restart the computer and then quickly, really quickly, start tapping on the key on your computer. It's usually Escape, F2, F12 or Delete. And once you get there, choose the USB flash drive, the Clonezilla USB flash drive, and boot from it. So this next step I'm going to do is not relevant to Clonezilla, and I'm only going to do it because I'm using VirtualBox, so I'm not going to explain it, and I'll just quickly do it. So this is done. And now when we will start the virtual machine, it will boot from the Clonezilla USB flash drive, just as if we open the boot manager and chose the Clonezilla USB flash drive from there. And we can see the Clonezilla welcome screen. Let's go with the first option, Clonezilla Live. We need to choose a language. I'll go with English. And I'll go with the US keyboard layout. And let's start Clonezilla. Now I'm going to go with the device image option, the first one, because what we want to do is to create an image of the disk. So the device is the disk that we want to back up, and the image is the image that we're going to create. And it's going to be an exact copy of this disk. So device image. Now I'm going to choose local device, because the device I'm going to create the image on is plugged into this very computer. So there is nothing remote here, everything is local, so local device is the option we want. Now is the time to make sure that the big storage device is plugged in. In my case, I didn't even unplug it, but if you did for any reason, now is the time to plug it back in. And once it's plugged in, press enter. We now see a list of all of the devices that Clonezilla recognized. So the first one is the internal disk. In my case, it's the VBox virtual disk, but in your case, it's probably the physical disk, the internal disk that you want to backup. The second disk is the big storage device. In my case, it's a WD external hard drive, and as you can see, its capacity is 5 terabytes. By the way, you don't see on this list the USB flash drive where Clonezilla itself resides, and it's okay. So make sure that you see both of the disks, the internal one that you want to backup and the external one where we'll create the image. And then press Ctrl+C. So Clonezilla maps all of the disks and partitions. We now need to choose the device on which we'll create the image. In my case, it's the WD elements, and I'm using their partition of 3.9 terabytes, and it makes it really easy to make sure that this is the correct one. So choose the storage device where you want to create the image, then press enter. We can do some check to the file system, but I'm going to skip over it. And now we're going to choose the folder that we created on the external hard disk in the beginning. Do you remember it? It was Clonezilla repo 2, this one. So I'm going to choose it, and then I'm going to hit tab twice, tab, and done. And let's press enter again. I'm going to go with beginner, it gives us everything we need. And the option we want is save disk, because we want to save our disk as an image. So let's choose save disk. And we need to give a name to this image. We now need to choose the disk that we want to backup. As you can see, I only have one option, and that's the internal disk. In my case, the virtual disk or VirtualBox. In your case, it's probably your internal disk. Here I'm going to go with the default. Again, skip over any checks. We can ask Clonezilla to verify the image it created once it is created. So I'll go with yes, why not? I don't want any encryption. And we want Clonezilla to ask us what to do once it's done. So let's go with choose. And as we can see, all of the partitions that are going to be in this backup are on the same disk, the internal disk, in my case, the VirtualBox virtual disk. So it is SDB, this is the disk, and then SDB1, SDB3, and SDB4. So yeah, let's continue. And now Clonezilla is doing its own thing. It will take a few minutes, and it depends on how big your disk is. In my case, it's a virtual disk, and it's not really that big, so it won't take that long. Okay, so Clonezilla is finally done, and I also used this time to take a break. And we can see that the final message is checked successfully. So the image was created, and it's supposed to be valid since it was checked. Let's press enter to continue. And let's reboot the computer. Now again, since I'm on a virtual machine, I have to detach the virtual disk that exposes the USB flash drive. But if you're on a physical machine, you won't need to do it. You'll just boot from your main disk and not from the Clonezilla USB flash drive. And the computer was restarted. Let's see what we now have in the external disk. So let's open our Clonezilla repo 2 folder. And here is the image we just created. It looks like a folder and we can browse its contents, but these files don't really say much to me, and all we need to know is that this is what Clonezilla will need to restore the image. Let's now say that I keep using my computer, and after a while I did some unwanted changes. So as an example, let me change the background of my desktop. Let's choose this one. Now, of course, changing the background of the desktop is not a big deal. But let's assume that you did something different, something that you don't want and you want to revert it. That's where the image comes in handy. What we're going to do now is use Clonezilla to restore the image we created and replace the contents of the disk with the contents of the image. So again, we need to plug in the Clonezilla USB flash drive. It's already plugged in for me. And we need to restart the computer and enter the boot menu by quickly tapping Escape or F2 or F12 or Delete. Again, in my case, since it's a virtual machine, I'm going to use the virtual disk. So let's turn off the computer, then turn it on again and boot from the Clonezilla USB flash drive. And again, we're going to start Clonezilla live. Let's go with English and with a default keyboard layout. And let's start Clonezilla. And again, we're going to go with device image. This time, the image will be the source and the disk will be the destination. And this option belongs to the device image option as well. Again, the image is in a local disk that's plugged in, so let's go with local device. And make sure that the storage device that contains the image is plugged in, then press enter. And again, we can see two devices. The internal hard disk, which in my case is the virtual disk, and the WD external hard disk, which contains the image that we want to restore. So it's okay, let's press Ctrl+C. Again, Clonezilla maps all of the devices and partitions. And again, we need to choose the device that holds the image. In my case, it's WD Elements. And it's really easy to recognize since its size is 3.9 terabytes. So if it's that big, you're probably not going to miss it. Again, let's skip checking. And we need to choose the folder that contains our image. In my case, Clonezilla repo 2. I remind you that if you would use a folder whose name contains spaces, you would not see it on the list. But we didn't have any spaces in the name, so everything is okay. And here we can see the image. So tab, tab, done. We'll go with beginner again. And this time we want to restore an image to a disk. So we're going to choose restore disk. We need to choose the image, and this is the image, the only image in our folder. And we need to choose the destination disk. Again, I only have one option, the internal disk, the VirtualBox virtual disk. We can check the image before restoring, but I'm going to skip it. And let's choose what to do once Clonezilla is done. We are being warned that everything on the disk will be wiped out. It will be completely replaced by the content of the image. This step is irreversible, so make sure that you really want to do it. I do, so I'll choose yes. And we're being warned again, so I'll choose yes again. And Clonezilla will now restore all of the partitions in the disk. Great, it's done. Let's unplug the Clonezilla USB flash drive and restart the computer. And we can see that the background image is restored and the computer is in exactly the same state it was when we created the image.